Hello, my name is David Deane. I'm an associate professor at Atlantic School of Theology, and this is the AST podcast. This winter and spring, we're going to have 20 episodes where we'll be discussing theology, ministry, and the spaces where the church and the wider culture intersect. This first episode is on leadership, and we brought in the president of Atlantic School of Theology, the Reverend Canon Neale Bennet, and AST's Director of Leadership and Learning, Sherie Hodds, to discuss questions such as what makes a good leader? What are the characteristics a leader needs to have if they're to have buy-in from the people that they lead? And why, in 2020, is leadership, both inside the church and outside of it, perhaps more important than ever? I do hope you enjoy it. Neale, when did you start as president of AST?
I started in the summer of 2015, July 1st, 2015.
And it was noticeable straight away that leadership was a core theme, that you brought a focus on leadership. Can you tell us what your thinking was and what your vision was for leadership in a theological school?
Sure. Well, I had the great advantage of coming to AST as president at the end of a strategic planning process. So at that point, I had a mandate to implement the strategic plan that had been developed over the preceding couple of years. And that included a kind of a refresh of the mission statement for AST. And the mission statement speaks to leadership. It's right there. And I think that makes explicit the fact that for the past nearly 50 years, we have been about leadership and leadership development. So, I've practically got the mission statement tattooed on my arm.
Yes.
But the relevant words are that our mission is to advance Christ's mission by shaping faithful and effective leaders and understanding among communities of faith. So that aspect of our mission, shaping faithful and effective leaders, is something that really resonated with me personally, and something that's an interest to me. But for any president, the idea of leadership in an institution, organization, theological school, university, is to implement the mission. And so for me, it really revolved around the mission.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So I hear that, and I think, and I that's 100%. But the mission predated Neale Bennet.
Yes.
And yet I remember from just meetings and planning and visioning, leadership was a theme which was coming up more and more. And so this speaks, and maybe we can bring Sherie in here and then come back to you. But this speaks a wee bit, I think, to an awareness in our society at large, and also in the church, that leadership is something that we need to take more seriously.
Absolutely.
Is that something that you find like that's your bread and butter? That's
what I care passionately about. Is that this is why we're here, is to become the best possible version of ourselves, and so that we can lead our best lives. And so the idea that we can look inside, we can confirm our values and lead from our values to become leaders of integrity in this world, so that we can see the change that we want to be, the change that we want to see, is that we can create that in our worlds at an individual level, and then in a larger context.
And why now? Why in 2015? Why did I, who sort of is on the periphery of these kind of questions, but as a bystander, I've noticed in the second decade of the 21st century, all of a sudden leadership, the volume around the necessity in thinking critically about leadership became amped up. Why is that?
Well, I've got a couple of ideas, and just I'm a bit of a broken record about our mission, but to take it back to the mission of AST, that first clause in the mission statement is to advance Christ's mission. And I think there hasn't always been an understanding that is about change. that actually we need to change the church, we need to change our communities in order to change the world, in order to bring about that realization of the kingdom or commonwealth of God. That's a change process.
Yeah.
And whenever you talk about change, that requires leadership. And whenever you talk about leadership, to my mind, that's about leading change. So the churches are in this time of profound change. It's being driven by all kinds of factors, but there's incredible pressure on the institutions that we serve, the churches that we serve, to change, to transform, to be newly relevant in the world today. And then if you take it out beyond the church, we're seeing, we can name all kinds of examples of leaders, so-called leaders, if I could put it that way, who are not acting out of a set of values that we would collectively honor, and or perhaps saying one thing and doing another thing. And it seems like we are in a bit of a global leadership crisis right now.
Right.
Yeah. So I think those two things are not unrelated. The churches are looking for new ways to be church, and that's calling for new ways to lead. And the world is seeing, manifestations of leadership that really don't serve the common good in the way that we would like them to.
And in addition to, so we're thinking here about people like Donald Trump, we're thinking about Salvini, we're thinking about Orban, we're thinking about that the second decade of the 21st century has seen the rise in a form of leadership that we perhaps thought was consigned to the past.
Maybe hoped.
Yeah. So, so tell us a wee bit about that. So one of the things which the military, of course, have been involved in thinking about leadership for a few millennia now, and one of the constant questions that emerges is, why do certain people have the capacity to say, so let's take, for example, we've heard of all those psychological experiments, these experiments where someone says, okay, Sherie, push that button and Neale will get shot. And if Sherie trusts the authority of that person, Sherie will do this, So there seems to be something almost pathological in us, which makes us or gives us a grudging respect for these people who claim authority. Can you speak a wee bit about the pathologies that can arise from that in an ecclesial setting? What are the downsides to that? So we can see in someone like Trump, we can see one downside is that he is reactive on the basis of his own psychology and his own emotions, and that he will commit actions which are not reflective of the interests or the will of the people he serves. What might that look like, or does that ever happen in a congregational setting, an ecclesial setting?
Sure, of course it does. And, I think, a couple of things occur to me. One is this very simple construct that really to lead positive change at a global level, or to influence the world in a small way, but in the right direction, it starts with leading self. I think, Sherie, you touched on this, right? So there's a very simple construct that leadership starts with leading self, and then from that basis of grounding in values and that sense of integrity and self-awareness is a key part of that, then you can lead a team. And if you're leading a team from that place, the team can lead the organization. And if the team and the self and organization are all acting in that fashion that is grounded in a real sense of what's important and what's good and what's right, then that can actually change society, change the communities around us. So I think what we are seeing, to a certain extent, is that we've lost, if I can generalize, the ability to stay with uncertainty and with pain. Just at the time when the world is getting, in some ways more painful and a lot of ways more uncertain. And so then along comes somebody who says, I have the answer. There's something appealing about that. because it's easier to go with that than to stay with the inner processes of grappling with what uncertainty does to me, how I find my way through that. If I can offload that to somebody else, I'm happier.
Right.
Yeah. So to take it back to your question, I think one of the things that can happen in a congregation or in a parish is because the clergy person is in a place of recognized authority and historically representing Christ in that community, there is a real temptation on the part of the community, the congregation, to say, okay, give us the answers, be the strong person who will lead us through this time of uncertainty. It's on your shoulders. Go to it. And there's a huge temptation for the clergy person as the recognized leader to integrate all of that and to try and take it on. And all of that's bound up in this idea of clericalism. Yes. David, you have really looked hard at the pitfalls of clericalism. It can lead to all kinds of ills when a community sort of grants undue authority to a leader and offloads their own responsibility, and a leader takes that on, maybe misuses that because there's a temptation to do that, or leaders step into that because they're attracted to the power.
I think that's exactly it. That there's a tremendous temptation on the part of both the leader and the congregation. The congregation, you see it in very, very, very micro ways in human relationships. So, if my wife Jen and I, if we're driving somewhere and we're sort of deciding which way to go to try and get to our destination, there's often a temptation for one of us to go, no, okay, that's the way, you go, let's go with that. And you remove yourself from the decision-making process. And in so doing, it's all on them. And if it works, fine, it worked, it's great. If it doesn't work, then you have And so surrendering leadership is comforting. And I think in a Christian context in particular, you're going to have an awful lot of congregation leaders out there who essentially are on the hook for proclaiming the gospel, who are on the hook for visiting the sick, who are on the hook for liturgy, who are on the hook for feeding the hungry, who are on the hook for all these things that every Christian is called to do.
Exactly.
And the congregation can say, you do it on our behalf. Which is really toxic for the congregation to surrender that. And then also, particularly in the past, I'm thinking of a Roman Catholic context, and often in a sort of rural Nova Scotian or an Irish context, that was tremendously gratifying for the leader who was attaining this, quasi-divine status as the Holy One. And it led to this sort of toxic environment where clergy were never questioned and where people were disenfranchised. One of the things which is, to me, a wee bit encouraging in relation to the Donald Trump thing. So I think before this weekend, and I could be completely wrong on this. This is a theory I have. But if you were to list the really problematic decisions of Donald Trump on a sheet of paper before this weekend, when we have the assassination in Iraq, most of them would be fairly compatible with previous decisions that were made in previous administrations. And so even his, he expands the countries that can't fly into the States, but under the Obama administration, there were some. There were, shameful to say, cages at the border under the Obama administration as well. And yet we were all horrified constantly by Donald Trump. And I think I hope that the reason for that is that we were aware on some deeply human level of a pathological immorality there. in that we were seeing someone who was extremely reactive, extremely vulnerable, extremely petty, filled with a sort of a self-loathing that manifested itself as aggression. And so we were aware that this person could not be trusted to make any decision. And then as soon as we have something which aggravates him, he sends in troops and blows up this person and that person, and so we saw it coming, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why that's in a sense hopeful to me is that even though we're in a kind of a post-moral age, we're not comfortable speaking about morality, we're not comfortable speaking about virtue, we're not comfortable speaking about any of these things. We were all aware on some level that perhaps the biggest problem with Trump was not necessarily legislation before last weekend. It was character.
Right.
It was character. And character seems to be, again, it's very old-fashioned.
Right.
But it seems to be absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
As leaders, do you feel that responsibility to manifest character and to be the kind of person modeling the virtues which are essential for a congregation or a team or whoever you're working with? Yeah. Tell us a bit about that, Sherie.
I think it's all of us. It's human, right? It's just Donald Trump is ego. He's just all ego, and we all have that part of ourselves. But it's this idea that leadership is not equated with power. Leadership is everywhere. But you have to choose it for yourself. So you don't have to be a leader of a team. You can be in any capacity, whether it's at work or at home, wherever it might be. But you have to choose that for yourself, and you have to be willing, as Neale was saying earlier, to be with the pain and uncertainty, and to step through that, to be with it in order to learn from it. And so when we do want to do this exploration within, we want to understand our true nature. Who am I really? You know, and that leads back to values. What do I truly value? What do I really care about? Who am I? And then to be able to not only understand that for yourself, but put it into an action in the world. And so someone like Donald Trump is not doing the reflection. Right. He's human, right? But he is that aspect of ourselves that we most shy away from. So you're right. It doesn't matter what decision he really makes. We already have this vision of who he is. He is that nature of us that we are wanting to back away from. But we have to be with it and work through it and understand it and really be able to choose our better nature, to choose the moral way, to choose our character, and then to be able to live that moment by moment every day in order to make the change that we want to see.
Yeah. I have to say, I love your silver lining view of Donald Trump. Like he's, he calls character out as a key question about global leadership. There's no doubt about that. I think, the risk is, of course, that he also manifests the potential to become the most powerful person in the world, despite, maybe even because of profound character flaws. But I'm with you. I agree that, character as leadership, and I think character is leadership, is really on the agenda now in a way that, illustrates just how high the stakes are.
I love your point about power, too. It's an abdication of power to give it all to Donald Trump. It's an abdication of our own power. And I think people are starting to realize that they need to choose it for themselves in order to...
There's just back to the dynamics in a congregation. There was a really interesting study, 10 or 15 years ago, that showed that generally speaking, clergy have a higher external locus of control. And that means that they look to others for affirmation and reinforcement of self, right? Positive reinforcement. Same study showed that congregations and ministries of community, like congregations and parishes, tend, generally speaking, to be less predisposed to offer that to clergy.
Wow.
Right? So you have a perfect storm of clergy looking for love from the congregation, and the congregation saying, aren't you the one supposed to love us?
Wow. That is
interesting.
This particular study tied that to clergy burnout. But that dynamic, I think, is part of what plays out when character is in question. Like if I'm looking for love from all the people around me, as we all do, I might be tempted to act in ways that are actually fundamentally off course. It's
a little bit sad to to remember this, but in so many, so we're suggesting here that for good or for ill, the simple fact is that the character of the leader matters. That the morality of the leader is a crucial thing, and this places significant onus on a leader. Now, if Tim Cook is realizing that, which Tim Cook does realize that, and he's saying to himself, okay, I need to live in a certain way and speak in a certain way and be a certain kind of person if I am to model the values that are intrinsic to Apple. He's saying that he will do that and he will receive an annual salary of whatever $1 billion. I don't know what it is. Yeah. Clergy are on the hook, no less, perhaps even more so, for being... For manifesting that character, and their rewards are, well, their monetary rewards are absolutely minuscule, and also their, in a sense, their psychic rewards from what you're saying there. That the basic affirmation that we have disempowered and laity and congregations have been disempowered to such an extent that they see themselves as the recipient of the love rather than the givers of the love. And they also see this person as being so lofty that they would never deem themselves worthy to say, good job. You know?
Exactly.
And so that creates a perfect storm for clergy leaders, which makes it extremely difficult, you know, and also difficult to prepare leaders for this. I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's tremendous pressure on clergy in particular, huge expectations to manifest the ideal. That gets back to this idea that clergy traditionally have represented Christ. So you have to be Christ-like. Never mind that we're all expected to be Christ-like in some fashion through baptism, right? But clergy are meant to be perfect. And so there's a huge pressure to fake that, right? To pretend to be perfect. To suppress all your own issues and questions and sense of self-confidence problems and that sort of thing. So push all of that down in favor of presenting this perfect persona. And when you do that, you're just inviting dysfunction. That's a real recipe for disaster. So somehow we need clergy to be comfortable with their own brokenness, not necessarily to act from there, but not to buy into either the perception of perfection or the expectation to rise to that level, but to be comfortable in their own skin.
And that's because we have to love ourselves. We can't be looking externally for affirmation and love and everything else. I mean, when we do the work and we love ourselves and are compassionate with ourselves when we're not perfect, because there's no way, because we are human, then that is an opportunity to be comfortable in our own skin and to love others from there.
It seems to me that the right behind, you won't be able to see, maybe you can see this, but behind Neale on the wall is a picture of the aforementioned Jen with Pope Francis, and last week Pope Francis made headlines due to a scurrilous assault on a dear sweet lady whose hand he smacked, and it was a terrible thing, and he looked at and acted really, really badly. It strikes me, however, that one difference I would hope between a clergy leader and someone like Donald Trump is not that the clergy leader is morally perfect and Donald Trump is entirely reprobate. It's that the clergy leader is aware of their failings, can apologize for their failings, and knows that that they are weak, that they are human. Whereas I suspect if Donald Trump had done that, he would have tweeted in all caps, "Damn right, I smacked her." You know, he would have owned it and doubled down on it and made it a sort of a symbol of power. You know, whereas and so it's not that clergy leaders are perfect; it's that they own their humanity.
They're self-aware.
They're self-aware.
And they own
exactly.
Humanness.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, that is our humanity, and that's where true connection is going to come from, is when we can appreciate our weaknesses. We know we're vulnerable. We can share that, apologize for it, be aware of it. And then that's where people can connect and come together, is that we are all human.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's no coincidence that we make a practice in the Christian tradition of confessing our flaws and weaknesses.
Yes.
And I think that's a very healthy practice. I think it's a practice where we remind ourselves that we're not perfect.
Right. Nor should we strive to be.
Yeah.
There's what is perfect anyway, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are two things which I want to speak about in the second half of this conversation, and one of them is tips and strategies, and what are the, both of you are leaders. What techniques, what strategies, what mantras have helped you in leading people? And then two, I want to make our listeners and our viewers aware of hopefully some of the exciting things coming up here at AST, where we're hoping to shape faithful and effective leaders and understand within communities of faith.
Yes.
So we will be back in a very short period of time. So, welcome back. One of the things which we focused on significantly in the first half was the only partially teachable things. So definitely character is coachable and character is trainable, but it's also very, very personal, and there's so many interesting variables there. But any leader, and you, I'm sure, and Sherie, have on the job learned approaches, techniques, habits, practices which help you become a more effective leader. What would you say that some of those practices and habits and techniques are?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to note is it really isn't fundamentally about technique. They're helpful, but what's at the heart of leadership is the leader, and what we do here, for example, has a big component of formation to it. So that is about working with the character, the person, your identity, who you are, really getting grounded in what you believe. And having said that, I think the first thing I would say is it's vitally important to have a practice, to do something day in and day out that nurtures that formation, that cares for the soul, that shapes the character. And I think that's really important, to have that intention and to follow it through. And again, David, like I'm taking a page out of your song sheet. I've learned this from you, just how important it is. That because practice shapes the moral self. I think I'm paraphrasing you, if not quoting you. So having a practice is really, really key. The second is having, and this is no great, profound, brand new idea, but it's really crucial to have a group of people outside of your leadership context, not in the congregation, maybe not even in the church, who can be really frank with you, and to whom you can be really frank. And so that idea of, letting the persona slip and being real with people that you really deeply, profoundly trust as a practice and as a resource to the leader, that's crucial. And because the more you do that with people that you trust, the more that you can trust other people and to be real with. But the third thing, and this is a very practical thing, I would say that it would be valuable for any leader in any context, whether it's a church context or it's living out the vocation of leadership in business or government or healthcare or social services, or not-for-profits, anywhere, is to understand that leadership is about leading change and to immerse yourself in a model of change leadership. And there are lots of them out there. It's a very well-developed field, change management or change leadership, and to find the one that works for you and use it. So there's one that I really like. It's very simple. It was developed by a guy named William Bridges, and it's all about transitions. And the idea is that you make a change But what really has to take place is the transition, that psychological or spiritual adjustment and integration to the change. So the classic example is you move house, but for months afterwards, you can't find the potato peeler. You might drive down your old street on the way home from work. It takes time for that new house to be your home.
Right.
When you've achieved that, that's you've gone through the transition. The change is moving house. That's pretty straightforward. You hire a moving company, you pack things up, and you buy some pizza and beer for the people who are helping you move. But that transition, and this is Bridges' model. That process is the key element to change, and so that moves through 3 phases. And the first is the letting go. So helping people grieve the loss. With every change, there's a loss, and helping people grieve their way through that loss in a healthy fashion is really important to the change process. The next phase, as Bridges calls it, is the neutral phase. It doesn't sound like there's anything neutral about it, but his idea is you go through a period of great confusion, can be distress, a bit. It's kind of wandering in the desert for a while before people are ready to embrace the new idea, the new vision. And that's the third phase, is the beginning, the new beginning. The leader has to be able to recognize those 3 phases and to walk with people. And there are techniques and methods and things that you can do in each of those 3 phases that are important to those 3 phases. But to be able to walk with people and guide people through those phases without getting immersed in them again yourself. So typically a leader, probably going on way too much here, but typically the leader is already in the new beginning. You see the vision for what's possible. You see the need to make it happen. You're already there. You've gone through the other 2 phases. You're standing in the great new idea. Everybody else is still, they're starting to understand they're going to lose something here. You have to go back and be able to walk them through that grieving process without getting caught up in that grieving yourself. You should have already done that.
Right.
Or to get frustrated with people because they're not already where you are. Or to get frustrated
with people because they're not already where you are.
Yeah.
That's it, exactly. Yeah. And so patience and pastoral care are important. And then there's that period of wandering in the desert. You got to give people a little direction. You got to give them some things to work on. You got to give them some crunchy stuff that helps them get regrounded and understand that this isn't going to last forever and that there's something on the other side.
Right.
And again, the leader has to be patient and understanding and compassionate. And there are techniques for each of those phases that Bridges lays out some very practical ways. So that's just one of many.
That's
a very
excellent,
useful
because as you say, going through my head, there were so many examples that fit exactly that model.
Right.
That leadership is always, as you say, leadership of change. I'm thinking about ArcDos and restructuring here, and But even a minister going into a congregation and looking to say, okay, we're going to do an annual blessing this Sunday.
Yeah.
How do they work with people to get them there? And what, Sherie, and sorry to catch you off guard with a question out of the blue, but is there anything you could say, or what opinions do you have in relation to what kind of factors go into deciding whether the congregation will go with the leader or not?
Yeah.
What determines buy-in?
Yeah. Well, just to tag on exactly to what Neale was saying, and these are just a couple of examples as well, is to be able to tell a compelling story of where you're going and why. Right. What is the purpose of this? What is it in it for me as an individual? To be able as a leader to speak to meet people where they are, because they're going to be in all kinds of different levels and stages and phases, is to be able to meet them exactly where they are, to be able to listen deeply to them and understand where they are, and then to be able to bring them along by showing them what's in it for them, why it's important to them, why it's important to the in the bigger picture as well. What is that compelling story, that vision that we're working towards, and why it's so important to all of us to move in our own way towards it. So that's
gotcha.
That's
so if you're a leader, that's tremendously helpful. The first step is making sure you've got that story yourself, that you're clear on the story, that you're
Exactly.
committed to the story,
Yes.
and that you can say, here's why people
Yes.
will benefit from this story,
Yes.
and then working with that narrative with the congregation
Absolutely.
or the group to bring
Right.
them in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be able to constantly tell it, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a one-time thing. It's a
Right.
constant bringing along and
Mhm.
a constant reminding,
Yeah.
and then be able to tell it at an individual level as well.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on that, there's something that I often think of, and I can't remember where I heard it first, but the line is, people need to know that you care before they care what you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So at the heart of it, you need to build the relationships before you're able to lead people.
Yes.
Right.
You know, they're not going to care what your grand idea is unless they really understand that you have the
Their back.
interests of their back and the interests
Yeah.
of the community at heart.
Yeah.
It's strangely helpful, but also extremely chilling, because so much of what we do in the church, we don't do that with. So if you take the sort of the Sunday liturgy, every single part on that, there's no one saying, here's why we're doing this.
Right.
Here's why it makes sense. Here's why it's going to help you.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, we do this because, I don't know, this is the way we've always done it, and it says it in the book. And so therefore nobody is on board.
Right.
Well, I think
know?
what's essential, what you're saying, is that this is a conversation. This isn't a directive. It isn't a one-way street. It's inviting questions. It's making people feel comfortable, like they can ask, why are we doing this? Or I don't understand, or I'm still back here. And to be able to have it be a give and take, and to come together in conversation, in relationship, and build trust so that you can move forward.
Church is too often lost sight of that story.
Absolutely. And I think too, and I'll quote Archbishop Ron Cutler of the Diocese of Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island here. Too often we forget that it's not about the church, it's about the world. Too often we think that what we really need to focus on is the future of this parish. When actually what we're about is playing our part in changing the world to be more consistent with God's vision for this world that God so loves. Right? It's not about us, it's about what we can do to advance that vision of the world.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago at church, there was a guest preacher who he brought a number of parishioners up to the front of the church and had them stand in a circle facing each other, holding hands. And we all thought, oh, that's just beautiful, right? He said, this is horrible. Like, this is not what God wants. And then he had them turn around so they were facing out. And he said, this is what God wants, right? We do need to look outwards. And I think there's something about that idea of looking outwards and thinking, what can we as a community of like-minded, faithful people do in a faithful way that is faithful to God's vision, that will actually impact the world around us? And that sense of mission, that can transform the future of a congregation or parish. That sense of having a broader purpose than, kind of keeping the roof watertight or, opening up the church by removing pews. These are, this is all kind of detail stuff. It's all important and people struggle with it. I think they struggle with it less if they have a sense of that larger vision, that larger purpose for what we're about.
Yeah. Yeah, and we all have a role to play in that. And what it made me think of too, when you're talking about creating conversation in there and to bring like-minded people together, it's also about, and what we're about here at AST, is inviting diverse perspectives to the table as well, to learn from others and to understand completely different perspectives so that we can come together, be more creative, be more innovative, and create new ways of moving forward together.
Tell us a little more about AST and what we're doing. I mentioned at the start that, Neale, you brought a sort of a focus on leadership to AST. And in recent months, we've seen the arrival of Sherie. Tell us a little bit about your role at AST and what that is in general, and then what it looks like in terms of focusing on leadership for the AST community moving forward.
Well, I'm Director of Leadership Learning here at AST, and as part of the bigger vision and to really extend that mission of shaping faithful and effective leaders, we are creating new programming that's going to invite these conversations, just as we've been speaking of. So AST is an ideal sacred space in which to create this welcoming environment for people to have conversations, to invite diverse perspectives, to be able to look inward, to be able to have this exploration within a safe space. So what we're doing is creating workshops and other opportunities to have these conversations. So for instance, our first workshop will be leading from the inside out, facilitating change for a world in crisis, which David, you're going to be playing a role in, which is exciting. So just as an example, this workshop is a place where we're going to invite different leaders in, give them an opportunity to look inward, give them the tools and resources they need in order to have these conversations with themselves and with others, and understand how we can facilitate this change because this world is in need. And so we want to give people the ability, capacity, capability of creating that change that they want to see. Yeah.
There's a number of reasons why I'm really excited about this venture. Two of the reasons I'm really excited is the first one we've touched on at the very start, is sort of an awareness that a particular model of leadership has had pathological outcomes. And so what we see, I think, in a very particular way with someone like Donald Trump, that's in a sense.
Poor Donald Trump.
Yeah, I know, but he's just such a good example. I think,
I know.
But what we see there is a kind of a microcosm for an entire culture of leadership, which has led to or planet being in the situation it is. That is sort of a me first, self-aggrandizing, utilitarian, capital as the exclusive focus model has done to the planet what Donald Trump has done to America's reputation in many ways.
Yes.
And so that awareness, I think, is making more and more leaders in a whole host of different areas, not just the church, but in business and in politics and in media and so on and so forth, think, okay, maybe there are additional perspectives we need to bring on board. And when they do so, within theology, there has been a focus for quite some time on things that were considered extremely gauche within non-theological approaches. Again, questions of virtue, questions of morality. It was extremely fashionable to say that morality and virtue has nothing got to do with it, you know? And so, we think about people like Patton, or we think about leaders who, now forget all that namby-pamby stuff, but these people, we think of the violence and the destruction that was done. And so a theological focus incorporates those things that you were focused on earlier. In many ways, the first truly introspective person in Western culture to write was Augustine, and launching that perspective. It's interesting to me that that in the Roman Empire, in the Latin of the day, there was no distinction between moral merit and fame, or quality and fame. And so what people thought of you was who you were. And it was really one of the Christian contributions to that Western culture, which went, there could be a distinction there. There could be a massive separation. Augustine then, like championing these kind of ideas. And so it seems to me that there are a vast well of resources that we have within theological cultures for leadership in general, and not least in the environmental context that the West in its radically secularizing agenda has been focused. And we think about colonialism, we think about the destruction of Native American cultures and so on and so forth. The absolute destruction of the idea that the environment, that creation, is something beyond mundane,
right.
that there is something sacred
Yes.
here. Those ideas are ideas that we eschewed and we need to eschew if we were going to mine them for profit and gain. And that's something that religious traditions, not just Christianity, but a whole host of religious traditions can offer. And so it's exciting that when we think about leadership in the 21st century, we're thinking about leadership in a way which incorporates spiritual dimensions, incorporates metamaterial dimensions, which were shunned for a long time. And it's really exciting that AST, I think, with your leadership, is going to be involved in that and be at the forefront of that.
Yeah.
And so in April or March?
April 3rd and 4th.
April 3rd and 4th. There's a workshop about leading during environmental crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Climate change is just, we're experiencing crisis right now in the world, and climate change is just at the forefront there. It's just so clear. And so in order to really make that change, as I think you've said, you're not just going to innovate a new way out of that. We can't just continue as we are. In other words, it's got to be a fundamental change. And where does that begin? But with us, right? Yeah. So it's giving people an experience of how they can move forward, how they can look inside, how they can make change within or understand themselves more deeply in order to take the actions, inspired action that will create the change that they want to see, and come together with others to have conversation and understand new perspectives, to connect more deeply to the world, to nature around us. The Dean, Rob Fennell, will be taking us on a pilgrimage as part of the workshop. And then, IWK Foundation CEO Jennifer Gillivan will be bringing us into conversation to say, how can we make this real in our worlds, in our homes, in our jobs on a day-to-day basis, so that people can walk away with some tools and some resources and ways of moving forward. So it's not just an abstract notion of, ooh, I wish I could do something. Yeah. It's actually living it, and knowing how to create a practice for themselves that they can use on a daily basis that can really help become more clear in their leadership, and to be leaders of integrity, and to put it into action.
That's pretty exciting. And I'm really grateful to you, Neale, and to you, Sherie, for kicking off our podcast season. And it's interesting to me, and one of my hopes, which has always been an unfulfilled hope, but hundreds of people will be watching this podcast on YouTube, and hundreds will be listening to it on various audio platforms. And all these people will have so many insights in relation to leadership, and will have so many perspectives and so many ideas that weren't explored here today. It would be really wonderful if you could, write and comment under the YouTube video, and make some suggestions and help us and help some of the other viewers to get a better understanding of what leadership can look like for them. Because as you've mentioned, I think at the start, Sherie, that when we think about leadership, we often think about, again, people have been talking about Trump, church and whatever. But as you've mentioned, that every single person, that these ideas and these notions are relevant to everybody who's involved in leadership, at every level.
Absolutely, we can choose it. We choose it for ourselves.
We choose it for ourselves. And before we go, because you mentioned this area and I didn't follow up on it, but the subtext there seems to be that we can choose it, but maybe sometimes we don't. Is that?
Well, it's this abdication we were talking about earlier, right? The idea that we must be led and someone else knows better, and giving that, whether it's the leader of the church or the leader at work or even in the home, but we have a choice to step into our own leadership and to bring our own selves to what's happening and to be involved and engaged.
That's really important. And again, I don't want to go on too long, but these ideas are so interesting to me. It's something that I notice working with students a lot of the time. There are certain forms of speech which are often more common in women than men, where the speech goes up at the end and results in a kind of a question mark, which is a kind of a surrendering of authority. And I had a course last semester, and by far the most brilliant students in the course were women, and yet in their papers they were slower to claim their authority and claim their voice.
Yeah.
They were excruciatingly reticent to say, here's my argument. This is what I'm saying, you know. Whereas it wasn't the case in that course, but in other courses I've taught, particularly at undergraduate level, there are male students without a clue who go, this is the way it is. I am saying it, and my mama said I should say it, you know, and without any ability whatsoever. So I know you're involved in women's leadership, but this seems to be an important thing that we do, or we ought do and all focus on, particularly, is people who culturally their experience has tried to rob them of authority. And it's vitally important that we go, claim your authority, develop techniques for helping, and not just women, but minorities of all kinds, people right across the gender spectrum who have been disempowered culturally.
Absolutely.
And you've been working on that, haven't you?
I'm so glad you raised this, because yes, this is a real opportunity. It feels like the perfect storm we were talking about earlier, where women have this opportunity to really step into their own leadership. And there has been, society teaches us to be a certain way, whether you're male or female, whether you identify as a woman or a man, or however you might identify. And so the idea that we can bring all of this together, the yin and the yang, bring it all together. We all have that within us, both these masculine and feminine values. And so it's not only about women being able to claim their power and to claim their leadership and to be clear and understanding that their voice is so important and needs to be heard, but it's also understanding that all these feminine values that we traditionally sort of squelch, whether it's being compassionate leader or kind or empathetic, these all have a place to play in our leadership, whether we are men or women. And so it's so important to help women understand their value and understand that they have so much to bear, and for them to be in their self-authority with that. And then also to be able to give permission for everyone, male or female, to understand that all of these values are so important.
Yeah.
Compassion, kindness, but also assertiveness, and being able to be sure and certain in what you're saying, and to say, of course, my voice is important, right? No matter who we are. So it's also creating conversation for women to come together and understand that for themselves, and then to have a larger conversation with all people, so that we can learn from one another and bring all of it to bear for the greater good of our society and for the world in general.
Fantastic. That's an uplifting note to end it on.
It is.
Although it has a depressing echo in that we've a lot of work to do culturally.
Yeah, so that's what I want to add too. It's not just men and women, but there's also racial minority women and men who, there's a whole other aspect there where we want to hear these voices as well, to really hear these stories. We had an opportunity, the Honorable Mayan Francis and IWK Foundation CEO Jennifer Gillivan co-chaired a women's dinner that we held in November of last year. And it brought together women it was a very diverse group, unlike you usually see in Halifax anyway. We had an Indigenous leader, we had African Nova Scotian leaders, we had that everyone was at the table. And so we wanted to hear those stories. Like, that's a real opportunity to hear those stories that we don't get to hear, and learn from them and have conversation and understand how we can come together and really learn from it. And what is it that we don't even know we don't know that we can learn? Yeah, and if we don't, we'll keep on privileging particularly male expressions of, even if they're pathological, of leadership as quality leadership. Again, apologies for that. We were just cut off due to the camera being afraid of overheating. I think the ideas that Sherie was offering were so incendiary that the camera thought it best to shut down. But with the point you were making, Sherie, again, I think it bears repeating about how crucial it is to hear from a diversity of perspectives in order to change how we understood or how we value leadership. And I want to give you the final word, but the classic example in many ways
is Margaret Thatcher, who in order to become Prime Minister had to essentially mask any traditionally non-male characteristic.
Right.
Yes.
And then when she became Prime Minister, we think of the example with the hunger strikers. Again, I'm sure many of you are too young to remember this, but you have hunger strikers in Northern Ireland. And if she changed, so they were striking for the right to wear civilian dress rather than, which would indicate they were political prisoners rather than they were part of the general criminal population. And they were hunger striking for that right. And so all Margaret Thatcher had to do was say, okay, wear your own clothes, and they would live. But if she did that, she would out herself as a woman, because that would be a sign of compassion, which was understood by a patriarchal, indeed misogynistic society as weakness. And so whether it was there, whether it was in the Falklands War, whether it was in decimating the entire north of England during the miners' strikes, her big secret that she was not male could only be protected by her showing no compassion ever and becoming the Iron Lady, the Iron, the unorganic lady, the unlady lady, you know, in a sense. And so unless we change the culture, then we're going to force others into a white male Eurocentric mold of leader, and this change of the culture takes place in the home, it takes place in the congregation, it takes place in the school, it takes place in the ground, and so it involves all of us. You were saying taking our leadership or saying yes, accepting, is that the word you use?
I think so. It's permission for all of it, right? In all of us, so we all have these, whether they're male or feminine, values in us. We talked about kindness, compassion, empathy, what Margaret Thatcher could have, you know, really used to help heal. There's so much there that we can, you know, leverage and appreciate and embody in order to really have leadership of integrity. That and then men as well have this permission to be compassionate and kind and all of that, so that we have all of this to bear, all of these wonderful qualities that we have to bear, that can really help bring the change about that we want to see in the world.
Fantastic. Great note to end. Sherie Hodds, thank you so much. Neale Bennet, thank you so much. Thank you
David,
for watching and listening, and stay tuned for future episodes.
Great.
Thanks again.
Thank you all.